Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of Industrial Visionaries, the podcast. Today I'm speaking to Kevin Wood. He's Chief Industrial IIoT Architect at Cisco. Kevin, thanks for chatting with me today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure entirely. Great to see Cisco being involved in IIoT and Industry 4.0. Can you tell me a bit about how Cisco applies in manufacturing? Is this IT and OT, and where does it play a most significant role?
Yeah, so we are part of a team that's specifically focusing on OT within our customer base. So we speak the OT language every day. And I like to we have Dr. Phil moments or psychological moments between OT and IT on a regular basis. So what we try to be is the bridge between IT and OT. And what I often see is the stress relationship between is purely a lack of communication because they don't understand what each other's trying to solve. OT has obviously that persona wants to keep things up and running, drive for production efficiencies. And IT is really focused on trying to drive the success they've had in enterprise from a security perspective into that environment. And it's often perceived with some bristled feathers, if you will.
Got it. And so the gains for IT are mostly reliable data streams and then security. And the OT team supports the IT team here and makes sure that Industry 4.0 is actually achievable.
Yeah, IT is looking for security. They're looking for data analytics for the business. The office of the CISO, it's an extension of IT, is looking for total visibility. Historically, OT has been the black box in the middle.
Yeah.
And since we didn't know what was in it, we just tried to put walls around it and contain it. But that was only part of the picture. And what the CISO knows to know is if stuff is trying to get in or trying to get out, I need a complete picture so I can do a trajectory of an attack or a possible breach, but I need that visibility. And since the OT folks, as we said, is really focused on production, their typical security skill sets inside of OT and networking skill sets for that matter are fairly limited compared to IT, which means that in the OT manufacturing floor, there's typically a different hodgepodge of different manufacturers, different vendors, different equipment types, different security postures. And IT's really coming at it with the office of the CISO is I need to take risk out of that business.
Got it. And so then you step in, and would you also say like that unlocks Industry 4.0? You get a reliable network. I can get it. And then from there on out, so you got the network set up, you got some better security posture. What else can an organization drive now?
So if we think about this, I would say, if you talk to a lot of industries and if you ask them, are they at Industry 4.0 or at that stage? A lot of them will say yes, but I would beg to differ to say some of them are 3 dot something. Because 4.0 signifies that I have to have complete secure connectivity, right?
Yeah.
There's environments where there's air gap networks. That violates that, right? Because you don't have complete connectivity. And my personal opinion is the notion of an air gap network is a false sense of security because somebody can get in, whether it's a USB, whether it's somebody doing maintenance and attaching a laptop, there's always a ways around it. So
so unless you're physically actually air gapped, you're not air gapped.
Exactly. And I think that the best security is being connected, but you connect in the proper way. Now, to answer your question is what does that do? So I believe in manufacturing and other industries, there's these huge dark pools of data that are sitting out there because there's machines that aren't connected. There's fear around it. So we just leave them off to the side. And as you get and want to get into AI and machine learning and beyond, you need that data to train the models. And what do you do in the absence of data? Probably use synthetic data. And when you use synthetic data, you get synthetic answers. So it's not going to allow you to achieve the results that you need from AI. So it really bounces back again to the first fundamental thing that we need to care about is visibility. I can't protect what I don't know. And then I can't see it. I can't segment it or isolate it or put compensating controls around it. So it's really the foundation of this whole conversation is around visibility.
So it's an infrastructure layer to enable the transition from Industry 3.0 to 4.0, and then more data becomes available. And with that, no more dependencies on fake data or hunches, gut feel, and actually get data-driven operations out there.
Yeah, it's that black box that we talked about with OT. Suddenly that becomes a clear box. And I can see exactly what's going on. what's trying to get in, what's trying to get out. I've got a true baseline in my environment. And when I take that visibility information, most people don't realize it, but you're sitting on the largest and most powerful sensor environment in your entire operation, and that is the network. But it can also, if designed correctly, can be the most powerful enforcer. So we can in turn take visibility, take that dynamically and apply security policy back on the network based upon who you are. If it's ZJ coming in, I've got a person out, I've got a persona, right? Or if I'm a PLC or I'm an RTU or some device like that, I've got a persona. And on top of that, I can have a security posture persona, which is going to change how I interact into that facility.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And so it's sometimes said that manufacturers are behind the curve on a lot of things. Cisco's been around since 2006, if I remember correctly. And so if you compare where Cisco has taken networking from 2006 and where new technology has been incorporated in your product suite, like what can manufacturing still learn from Cisco, and where do you think the next steps are being made right now?
Cisco in the industry is probably early 2000s, but networking before goes into the 90s. So we've been around a while, and what we try to bring to bear is the best practice. Now, industrial IoT and our products, yeah, they are a bit different from enterprise, but they have the same fundamental underpinning that we have the hard candy shell around enterprise products. They got conformal coding, they don't have fans. We also introduced the notion of realizing industrial protocols on board. So we become intelligent there. So when we come in, our goal of our team is to really bring the best practices across our core verticals, which are manufacturing, could be utility, could be oil and gas, but it's anything that's ruggedized and security. But bringing those best practices based to the customer and say, here's how, if you ask us, how would I build a factory tomorrow based on produce segmentation, based on our best practices? Our goal is to come in and say, here's your North Star, as if you were asking me to build it. We obviously don't expect everybody to adapt that, but it gives you something to shoot for. And then our goal is to build a multi-phase approach to migrating people and helping them get, what does it mean to get visibility, and how do you take your current environment and get visibility? And then let's step back and take a pause. Now that we've got visibility and we've got all this asset information, what do I do? And then you can make the next step in the migration into security and segmentation of the stories like that.
Got it. So the migration story, I completely understood, because there's, well, almost all manufacturers are brownfield, and migration is the way to get new business. If it is a greenfield project, what's the state now, like 2020, 2025? What do people not have right now, and can they expect if they roll out greenfield?
So greenfield is going to be somewhat easy because we can talk about defining that model up front. Talk about laying in visibility and appropriate scalable infrastructure out of the gate, and build that up into that security policy. So that's easier, I would say. The brownfield effect, and why most manufacturers are a target, and I think it goes back to your previous question that I probably didn't answer, is they have legacy machinery. And a lot of manufacturing vendors will come in and say, if you're going to use this machine made by us, you have to use this type of networking gear, this environment. And so what happens is you get this bolted on beast, if you will, the various vendors, various teams even doing something different. And it really raises the risk bar. And I think that's why manufacturing is probably one of the most targeted areas. Because you may go out on the shop floor and you may see Windows XP, you may see Windows NT, all things that can't be patched any longer. But it's things that the equipment manufacturer may have not allowed them to upgrade. So not only is there a notion about having visibility through there and allowing segmentation, but we bring in the notion of compensating controls, which means, how do I protect an environment if I can't patch it, right?
Got it. All right. So we got all these assets. They might be legacy. We're going to plug them into the network. And then on a networking layer, we're going to mandate the security posture.
Yep. Let's say you plug in a Windows 95 device and I detect it with my visibility tools, I'm going to punch it up to my security posture assessor, and I'm going to say, this thing is way out of date on patches. It's got this list of vulnerabilities. So therefore, here's the new security policy that has to be applied to it to contain. And it's going to have a completely different policy. If I took a brand new machine with a brand new HMI and set it on the network, it'll have a completely different policy, because that's probably patchable, probably something that I don't have to worry as much about. But the historical stuff is really where we have to apply security based upon vulnerability.
And over the past decade, I would say, like the advent of cloud has been undeniable. And more edge is actually non-air gap these days and actually directly connected to the cloud. Are there any pitfalls there when you're connecting edge data, well, sensors and data sources to things which might be the cloud?
So, if we look at things like Purdue, I see the cloud as another layer of that model, right?
Yeah.
But it also brings an inherent different level and view of security. So it's something that we have to do, provide a different look at security. What it also may mean, for example, is there's a big trend right now where people are looking at virtualizing PLCs.
Yeah.
So taking away from the physical hardware and actually applying it to software in the cloud. But what that means is now I have to extend my layer 2 environment from my plant floor to the cloud, which requires a brand new set of networking expertise and technologies to make that happen. Because my HMI that sits in the plant is expecting my PLC to be adjacent to it.
Yeah.
But it's thousands of miles away somewhere in the cloud.
Yeah, latency you can't improve.
Yep. And we're dealing with physics there. So
yeah,
we have to figure out that's a constant. That's a very good point because that connectivity to the cloud is a constant. But how do we get them connected in a way that doesn't exacerbate the latency and that kind of fools them, if you will, that, we're sitting close together.
Yeah. I also wish I could make light faster, so my internet would be speedier, but that's not going to happen. Is there also a factor in terms of security around the implicit multi-tenancy of the cloud?
Yeah, there is. And that's why a lot of people have this hesitation to go there. What am I going to be co-resident with from a performance and from a security perspective? So a lot of folks, when they go into cloud instances, they are trying to figure out ways to demand a dedicated tenant, which is not always easy, especially in the public cloud providers where there's, elastic resources. So that is a big concern that deterred folks from doing that.
Okay. So we only do 15 minutes episode. I could talk for hours, but almost wrapping up already. And I wondered, what's the piece of advice you could give every manufacturing leader about how to roll out a secure network and what is their strategy on connectivity for the next decade?
Yeah. So the biggest piece of advice is be paranoid. Be paranoid that your environment is not secure, that you're one day away from a major hack and a breach. Don't be so complacent that you say, I know what's on my network. I don't have to worry about it because I can take almost anybody who says that, put visibility tools on the network and cause their jaw to drop, right? There's things they didn't know about. Always be paranoid. Always understand that when we're going to that next layer of, for example, AI and some of the biggest trends in the manufacturing industry right now are things like computer vision for quality and QA.
Yep.
Things like predictive maintenance and how I predict information from a sensor and how it affects downstream. All of that stuff requires increased connectivity. And with HD video, we're scaling the network bandwidth. So if we think about this model as a nervous system, where AI is the brains, all of our manufacturing layer are the limbs, the network itself is the nervous system, and we have to have something that we can scale with. So my advice was, to be paranoid around security, never underestimate and think that you know about everything that's on the wire. And then let's leverage that network infrastructure to scale, because that's going to be your key as you go into an AI and start innovating in that space. And one final thing, security is not your enemy, right? Security is your friend. So you cannot innovate without the correct security policy, because if you innovate without it, you just interjected risk into the business. So think of security as an enabler and not a cost center or an enemy or a disabler.
Yeah. So yes, be paranoid. Make sure you're not the one in newspaper tomorrow and that there's no inherent risk on your IP or your manufacturing process being stolen. And then secondly, future-proof your organization. Make sure that the next wave of innovation like AI, but also other technical and digital innovations require connectivity and require secure connectivity for that matter. Yeah, so set yourself up for success.
Absolutely. Yeah, don't fall into complacency or this is good enough, because with security, there's no such thing as good enough because the attacks are becoming so advanced. And then understand, if you're a manufacturer, just have to admit to yourself that I'm in the hot seat right now because I'm in the crosshairs of being a vulnerable industry, and everybody's out to breach me because they know I have a lot of vulnerabilities.
Cool. So, Kevin, if people want to follow along with what you're doing, where is the best place to do so?
Yeah, so they can find me on LinkedIn. What I try to do now is I'm starting to try to build video shorts around security and Industry 4.0 and connectivity and AI. So that's the best way to follow and trend what I'm doing and reach out to me and befriend me. And something that I can provide you as well as my LinkedIn link. I'm happy to connect there and chat.
We'll put those in the show notes. Thanks a lot for joining. It was a fun conversation. The first around networking, really happy to expand beyond assets and how to use those assets and sequence them and measure them. The network is such a fundamental piece, but I learned a bunch. Yeah, let's keep in touch. And thanks again for joining.
Thanks, DJ. Thanks for having me.